Friend, I want to invite you to join me in my next talk this coming Sunday. It's From Crisis to Creativity, and it deals with how this crisis is calling you to that greatness within yourself, to be a part of the solution, and to realize that when you open yourself up by being quiet within, by learning how to feel that still point of your turning world, that something emerges from you that is magnificent. So I want you to look forward to seeing that video as I bring it to you, and to recognize that it's going to be on Facebook and YouTube, and those of you who get the newsletter from Founders, we will have information on it. So why don't you join me and let's do this together.
Founders Church of Religious Science, a center for spiritual living, was dedicated January 3, 1960. The founder of Religious Science, Dr. Ernest Holmes, stated, "We are building a round church to symbolize that our arms embrace the whole world. The essence is universality, the pattern of oneness." The architect of the building was the great Paul R. Williams, and it is now on the National List of Historic Places. Welcome to the Founders Church of Religious Science, where Reverend Dr. Arthur Chang will lead us in today's service. Dr. Arthur Chang is only the second senior minister of Founders history.
Hello, friend. I'm Reverend Dr. Arthur Chang, Senior Minister of Founders Church of Religious Science, a center for spiritual living. Today, I'm in the wedding chapel, the Holmes Chapel as we call it, giving you a shot of some of the spaces around here at Founders Church that was built in honor of Dr. Ernest Holmes. But today, I want to talk to you about From Crisis to Creativity. We're all finding ourselves in a space today where there's a lot of fear, and justifiably so. But this is the purpose of spirituality, isn't it? Life is always going to involve us in things that are fearful, things that are fretful, things that are challenging to our very life. And where should we find that sense of peace that passes all understanding, but in our spiritual practices? And so this is really some of what I want to address today. I want to talk to you about the transformed mind, because whenever there is a crisis, we will find that great advances in the world will come from those crises. This is how we make that quantum leap forward. And we don't do it without people that seems before quite ordinary, but yet they summon something extraordinary about themselves and bring this quality to bear upon the challenges of your time. We can sit around and complain about all the things that are happening. We can say, well, we belong to this side and that side. But the real people that will make a difference are the ones who can truly center themselves and realize that there is a heroic call to be more than just our prejudices, to be more than just our preconceptions about something, to come to a place where we are understanding that life is calling us to do great things. And to do great things, we must go beyond the boundaries of our easy conceptions and to find that place within us that can infuse us with new inspiration. And in so doing, we are ready for the journey. We are ready as Moses was ready for the journey when he was called. We may look at it in terms of the hero's journey, that everyone here is on a hero's journey, that there is something about life that you may not like. But this has always been the challenges of life, the challenge of fear because we are feeling endangered, and the challenge of how to go forward by understanding a science of how things work. And when we begin to see God in terms of not only quelling our fear, but also having principles we can learn to do the work that must be done in spite of the challenges, then we are onto something. We call this the science of mind from my religious perspective. And where science means the way something works, and mind means God. So we want to know, how does God work? God works through principles. And when we get to a point where we are so focused on personalities, we will find that we are not going to work as effectively as when we understand that we must work through principles, where we take that feeling of prejudice out of ourselves and be open to this transformation, as Paul called it. So this is really where we are today, to look at these crises. And so my suggestion here is first to find out how we can quell the fears and the confusion, and sometimes even the lies. William James says, a lie repeated often enough will be believed. And we have to step back from all that to come into the quiet center within ourselves. And for this, I would say, Yoga Master Patanjali, the great Yoga Master, his first aphorism is, yoga consists of the intentional stopping of the spontaneous activity of mind stuff. What does that mean? It means that the mind is chattering all the time. And the chattering in the mind is often the fear that we have in regard to how we are relating to life. Now, can you imagine, the more fear we have about the situation in life, is the less we are going to be enabled to be creative. Because to be creative, we have to get out of anxiety. We have to come to that still point of the turning world, as T.S. Eliot calls it. We have to understand that there is a power in the universe greater than we are, that we can use and be willing and able to use it. So let's look at what Patanjali is really saying to us. Patanjali is saying that the mind is like a pond, and thoughts are like ripples of waves upon the surface of the pond. And for the pond to reflect the sky as accurately as possible, then it must become still. And in this stillness is the peace that passes all understanding. William James tells us that some people think they're thinking when they're just rearranging their prejudices. That's not what we want to do. And we see a lot of that in people who take sides that are not inclusive, sides that are not recognizing that God is to be considered whole, perfect, and complete, and that all of us are children of God. All of us are part and parcel of God. In the same way that God made many different color roses is the same way that God made the variety of human beings that we have. And when we come to a place where we understand spiritually what that means, we are coming to that place of transformation. So Paul says, do not conform to the pattern of this world, but be transformed to the renewing of your mind. Then you will be able to test and approve what God's will is good, pleasing, and perfect. So, my friends, the idea is the mind has to be transformed, because we grew up with a mind that is surrounded by the values that we get from our family, and then from our friends, and then from our country. But we need to understand that the world that we live in is Noah's Ark, floating in an ocean of space. And it's a tiny, infinitesimally small entity in this space. And for us to be here in this almost magical way, to be aware and to be aware that we are aware, and to be able to think thoughts and to be able to transform the world in how we think, this is something quite marvelous. But when we use it to separate ourselves, when we use it not to help each other, when we do not understand the call as the doctors and nurses understood the call to rush toward where we are having trouble with the COVID virus. When we do not understand that call, then we take sides, and sometimes take the wrong sides for the wrong reasons. The heroes right here, the ones who have heard the call and have come to us, are not only doctors and nurses. I remember when the virus started at first and New York was really troubled, there were doctors leaving and nurses leaving from other states to go there. These people were endangering their lives, and that's why we call them heroes. The people who had to keep on working to keep us having food and whatever it is that were necessary, the supermarket people, the police, all these wonderful people who had to be working. These are our heroes in this context. But there's so much more to do. But that's really what life is about. Life is about finding that need and fulfilling it. Finding where you're needed and bringing your talent to bear upon it. And this is what the crisis does. The crisis calls forth the greatness that is within you. And in this greatness, you're able to do things that you would not necessarily be able to do. Now let's face the fact that this life that we live has 5 unavoidable givens. These are 5 things that you can't change. And I know most of us who are positive would say, what are you talking about? We can change anything we want to change. Well, let me tell you what they are, and then you can decide. The first is, everything changes and ends. Well, can you change that? Everything changes and ends. The second is, things do not always go according to plan. Things do not always. We're going to talk about them in a little while. The third is, life is not always fair. The fourth is, pain is part of life. And the fifth is, people are not loving and loyal always. Now, let's see where we are with this, because the truth of the issue is, what happens when things end? What happened when you saw recently the insurrection? Something was ending and something was beginning. And the people who didn't want it to end had a particular way of approaching it. Now, if as a nation and as a people, we don't have a way of understanding that some things will end and some things will start, then what we will end up doing is saying no to something that should be a yes. And in all of these conditions of life, these unavoidable givens of life, we have to say, yes, I am accepting this as part and parcel of being a human being here, being a spiritual being here, and dealing with it as it comes. And so in this circle of life, we're going to find that there is birth, there is childhood, there's adolescence, there's maturity, there's old age, and there's death. And none of us are really volunteering to die sooner than we must. But we must realize that these are part and parcel of how life is, and we can't change them. The COVID-19 has killed over 300,000 persons in America alone, in the United States. And the irony is, in Taiwan, without having any vaccine and only having the mask and the social distancing, the people have been able to solve the COVID problem. They have no COVID problem now. And here we are with that technology, with that knowledge. But because we didn't feel like doing it, and it's our right to do what we want to do, we do not understand what the nature of living communally is. What is not good for the swarm is not good for the bee. is really an important aspect of understanding how to live with a group. And we are people who are related to each other. We're interrelational. We are people who are not going to be walking off into the mountain living by ourselves. When things don't go according to plan, what are you going to do? This is when you believe more deeply in that spiritual essence of life. That although something doesn't look like what I want right now, I am doing that prayer work. I'm coming into a deeper acceptance of my faith that things are going to work out just the way it need to work out. And there are times when I have to let go and let God. And this is how working from that quiet center that we talked about initially, about yoga consists of the intentional stopping of the spontaneous activities of mind stuff. This is where we are coming to be ready to understand that I can go and take a long walk. I can meditate, I can pray. I can understand that sometimes things won't work out according to plan. But what is interesting too is that although some things don't work out according to plan, sometimes things work out better than we planned. And the fact that we can shift our attention, the fact that we can come to a different awareness of how to do something opens us up to new opportunities and new possibilities that we would not see when we are somehow focused on just what it is that we think ought to be done. Remember, there is a mind in the universe that knows all things. We are an expression of that mind, but we don't know all things. But by being able to turn within, we can know more. When we look at life and see that things are not always fair, I think anyone who agrees that there is a need for us to look at structural racism, for example, you might not be one of those people because probably you're not affected by it. But for the people who are affected by it, they will see that life is not always fair. So what do? Do you just throw your cards in and say, well, I'm not really participating in our country and our nation? No, you don't. You learn how yourself can be as fair as possible in everything that you think, say, and do. It is Jesus' idea of turning the other cheek. How do you do that? Does that mean you just make people trample upon you? No, you can't just make people trample up on you. But the idea is you can stand for your rights, but you have to find that way to do it in a peaceful and loving way. And in time, as we have seen with Gandhi and we have seen with other people who have gone this path, we will find that it will awaken within others the truth of their being, that we are all connected, that we are all one. And so, although, that is the case sometimes where things are not fair, you won't go around holding a grudge. Because think about it. When you hate somebody, where does that hate take place? It takes place in you, in your world. When you love somebody, where does it take place? It takes place in you. And so you can understand why the teachings has always been by Moses and summarized by Jesus that you should love God and love your neighbor as yourself. And so why are we doing this? We're doing this because we want to have a life of freedom and fullness and delight. That's what we want. But if we do just the opposite things that can bring us the good that we desire, then what have we? And so love is really a big part of our solution, that we must not fall out of love when things fall out of fairness. And we can understand then that we must do unto others the golden rule as we would have them do unto us. So life is also pain. Pain is part of life. And it doesn't mean that, we won't feel pain sometimes when we try certain things. It comes with the territory. And again, those of us who like not to have any pain, it's never going to happen. So we recognize it, we acknowledge it, and we move on. They say what doesn't kill you will make you stronger, and that is probably something to look at. Finally, I want to talk about the fact that people are not always loving and loyal. This is part of how things are. And we are here to love one another, to recognize that when a problem comes up, it's not a problem for just this one or that group or that group. It is a problem that is for all of us. And we can solve it. And the big thing is, as mountainous as that problem may seem to us, we must realize that there is a power for good in the universe greater than we are, and we can use it. And once we accept that we can do this, we will come to a place of transformation. We'll come to a place where we understand that great creative advances are born out of the fiery crucible of crisis. A great crisis means a great opportunity for good. You're called, I am called, we're all called to be more than we have ever been, because this is how we will define our life and leave our legacy. God bless you all. Hello, friend. This is your opportunity to be part of this community, of reaching out to people and making a difference. And the way you can do it is you can donate to this ministry. Because though you may not be in our facility, you're part of the consciousness. You're part of the family of good that we are putting over that can be inclusive of the whole. We speak of God being whole, perfect, and complete, and we now get to act as if the law of circulation is working for us, that as you give, so do you receive. So I want to thank you all for your donations and your support, and I want you to know that we're building a ministry that is worthwhile, and it will touch many people, and you are a big part of it. Thank you. Now, it's time to pray. Let's turn within right now, where we can come to the still point of the turning world. And realizing, as Patanjali realized, that yoga consists of the intentional stopping of the spontaneous activities of mind stuff. The chattering monkeys of the mind are silenced, and we come to that still world within us, where the pond of consciousness is still, and where we can reflect the magnificence of spirit in our thoughts and in our deeds and in our words. And this is where we are right now. So we look at this crisis that seems so insurmountable, and we remember Jesus' words that if you have the faith as little as the mustard seed, and you say to this mountain, be removed and be cast into the sea, and do not doubt, it shall be done. And these are the mountains that Jesus is talking about, not the physical mountains out there, but the mountains that stand in the way of our greater good. So won't you accept with me right now that you have this faith within yourself, and with me you're speaking the word, knowing that what seemed to be so insurmountable is nothing in the face of the power of good of God that is moving in and through us here and now. And we accept that the solution is evolving into everyday experience, and we are feeling that unity and wholeness once again. Knowing that this is true, I say thank you, Father, Mother God, and together let us affirm, and so it is. Thank you for sharing this time. Peace.